Hi everyone. So in this video we'll compare Agile projects to the traditional Waterfall approach. The traditional way to manage projects is also known as the Waterfall approach. The simplified explanation of Waterfall is that instead of continuously planning and releasing increments of the product, you develop the entire product in distinct phases. A typical first phase is the analyze phase, where customer requirements are defined. The output of this phase is usually a requirements document, and the project then moves on to the design phase, where the features related to the requirements are designed. The output of this phase is usually a design document. The features are then built, and once the product is built, it is passed to the quality assurance department for testing. And when the product passes quality assurance, it is passed to manufacturing or operations for release. Each of these phases usually is owned by separate teams, so one team is passing their output to the next team in succession. You can see that the simplified view of the Waterfall approach contains effectively only one pass through the scientific method. There is no looping. That's why this approach to projects is somewhat similar to traditional mass production in manufacturing. The Waterfall approach still has value for some projects, but for many projects it is an outdated approach that leaves you susceptible to being disrupted by your competitors. The Waterfall approach to managing and building projects had many drawbacks. The biggest issue is that your big upfront plan will be wrong. This is because you can't predict the future, especially for complex one-off projects. Adding to that, high-value features aren't correctly identified until the customer actually tries a feature and they don't really know if they will use it. As a result, you build unnecessary features. For example, it may turn out that the customer really only uses 2 of the 10 features that you built. There is a waste not only in building those features, but also in making the customer wait for those 2 useful features while you build all 10. Continuing on this line, things are harder, more problematic, and take longer to build than you think. In general, people who build things are optimistic about how long it will take to build it. As a result, most complex Waterfall projects fall behind schedule, sometimes by quite a lot. And we should not forget that the market and/or your team will change while you build the product. In the Waterfall approach, you'd create a detailed plan for one big release in the future. During that time, the market may change in ways that you should be adapting to. But you don't, because you continue to follow the original plan. Also, if you lose key team members during the development of the project, it will delay the entire project because the original plan assumed that you would have the original team for the entire time. In Waterfall approach, change is hard and expensive. This is because you've created a big upfront plan and any changes can have major ripple effects for the rest of the project. A change later in the project life is especially difficult and expensive to make because a lot of work has already been put into the original design, and the product isn't designed to handle changes like that. This is why in any Waterfall project there is often a separate change management process for dealing with changes to the original plan. In a Waterfall project, you tend to create a lot of obsolete documents, because the Waterfall approach assumes that your project will go through distinct phases while the product is being built. The output of one phase tends to include a document or documents that the next phase picks up and works with. This is problematic in many ways. The document may not be written in a way that people in the next phase truly understand, resulting in waste. Also, as the next phase discovers things that need to change, they often don't update the documents from the previous phase, causing the documents of the project to become out of sync and eventually obsolete. Also, towards the end of Waterfall projects, changes are often made because of discovery of last-minute problems. These changes are often made without being properly documented, causing the documents from previous phases to become further obsolete. In Waterfall projects, the feedback on what you are doing often is drastically delayed. For example, let's say that you identified a high-value feature during the analyze phase. That feature eventually is released when the product is released. This can be months or years after the high-value feature was identified. This is a long time to wait to learn that your high-valued feature is actually of low value. Delayed feedback like this is a source of waste in the project. A question that you may have is, when is Waterfall used? Well, if the setup cost of a phase is high, you tend to plan very carefully and work in big batches. In other words, if it takes a lot of time or expense to set up what is needed to send a single feature through a single phase, you tend to batch the features in order to achieve economies of scale. And another reason to use Waterfall is when the work is relatively predictable. You can do the work in separate steps with large batch sizes. However, this is often not the case with one-off projects. And another question that you may have is, why is Waterfall outdated in many cases? Well, the setup costs of some phases are trending to zero, or at least no longer a major factor. This is true in terms of both time and expense, and means that the batch size can be reduced to much smaller numbers. You no longer have to think in terms of a project going through each phase successively, and instead of that, you can think of each feature or part of a feature going through each phase very quickly, as the setup cost of the phase of the project become overlooked. The entire justification for managing projects using the Waterfall approach begins to fall apart. Agile approaches become superior. Now, hopefully, you are beginning to see the clear difference between Agile and Waterfall approaches. In Waterfall, you are effectively performing one giant iteration of the scientific method, with the entire product being built phase by phase. In Agile approach, there are many small iterations where small batches sizes go through each of the phases relatively quickly. The end of the iteration results in a product increment that is usable by the customer. The Agile approach provides the benefits of rapid feedback, and because planning is continuously happening, the product can adapt quickly. And all projects are unique, and many projects will contain elements from both Agile and Waterfall approaches. If you need to use Waterfall techniques for some projects, it is a good idea to have a solid understanding of Agile principles and practices and use them where they make sense. If you are using Waterfall techniques on a project that doesn't really require them, there is a good chance that your competitors using an Agile approach will be at a strong advantage. And Agile processes are more concurrent, with each feature going through phases quite quickly. If you have multiple developers on an Agile project, each of them may be working on different phases at any one time. But we have seen that a Waterfall process is more sequential than an Agile process. Because of the fundamental differences between Waterfall and Agile processes, project management for the two approaches is different. Waterfall is more of a predictive command and control process with big upfront planning, and Agile is more of an adaptive distributed process with just enough and continuous planning. So, to sum up, the Waterfall approach uses one giant iteration and provides little continuous feedback. But on the other hand, the Agile approach uses many iterations and provides continuous feedbacks. That's why Agile project management is fundamentally different than traditional project management. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.